Good afternoon to my East Coast and good morning to everyone on the West Coast and in between. We are pleased to have you join us for this pertinent discussion around student attendance and family engagement hosted by Digital Promises League of Innovative Schools. Of all factors that determine student outcomes, family engagement is at the top of the list. Although some families proactively engage in their students' education, research shows that teachers can initiate and encourage engagement from all families with positive results. Involving families and students who learn and think differently is especially important. Schools are required by federal law to seek input from parents and guardians in the development of their student IEPs. Schools must provide families with updates on their child's progress through their IEP goals. In addition to these mandates, it has been shown that meaningful interactions between teachers and families of students who learn and think differently can build trust, inform instruction, and improve student outcomes. In partnership with Kinvolve, today we will have this timely discussion and conversation on student attendance and family engagement. I am Dwayne McCleary, Director of the League of Innovative Schools at Digital Promise, and I would like to introduce my co-host, Marian Altman, co-founder and CEO of Kinvolve. Welcome, Marian.
Thank you, Dwayne.
So now I'll turn it over to you, Marian, to introduce our panelists.
Good morning, everyone. It's so nice to be here today. I'm going to actually just do a quick overview before we introduce our esteemed panelists today. So thanks for joining us. We're super excited about this topic and so excited to have our panelists from Newark Public Schools, Miami-Dade Public Schools, as well as the New York City DOE, which is, I know, a proud Digital Promise member. So again, I'm Miriam Altman, co-founder and CEO of Kinvolve. I'll tell you a little bit about what Kinvolve does in just a moment, but just wanted to give you a sense of what you can expect to come away with today. We have a really highly experienced panel whom, like I said, I've introduced you shortly, and they're going to be the main focus of today's presentation and conversation. From today's panel and Q&A, you can expect to walk away with an understanding of the underlying causes that lead to absenteeism in all learning scenarios, whether that's in person, remote, or hybrid, solutions to eliminate those causes and prevent absenteeism, research-based practices that you can implement today to better engage families, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that before we dive into our panel in just a moment, effective tools to help you manage and maintain high attendance engagement and communication with all families and students, regardless of access to device, the language that they might speak, internet access, and location that they're joining in from, and an awareness of how attendance and family engagement can accelerate recovery as we're all thankfully starting to turn that COVID corner and excited about the opportunities to get back into the classroom at full capacity come this fall. So before diving into the panel, I did want to share a little bit of important information, research behind attendance and family engagement, as well as context about the organization that I do lead, Kinvolve. We found it really helpful to break down absenteeism into 3 tiers. We call this the tiers of intervention model, which was actually developed by our colleagues at Attendance Work. Many of you, I'm sure, on the call today have heard of them. They're a leading nonprofit in this space. So students in Tier 1 are in good standing with regard to attendance and engagement. Students in Tier 2 are moderately chronically absent or disengaged. And students who are in Tier 3 are what we call severely chronically absent. So at Kinvolve, we have built our Kinvo software to help school systems address and support students and their families in each of these tiers based on what the research proves works. For students who are in Tier 1, Kinvo helps to facilitate positive, 2-way communication via text, email, and phone call in more than 80 languages. These positive touchpoints are proven, again, based in research to really help keep kids from becoming absent and keep kids engaged. For Tier 2 students, Kinvo helps schools and districts to automate communications, including reminders about class start times, when school breaks are coming to a conclusion, and sending out what we call digital attendance postcards, which I'll explain in a bit more detail in an upcoming slide. And for Tier 3 students, Kinvo really helps schools and districts, district leaders to monitor and act on data that we pull from the student information system, which immediately illuminates trends, areas of progress, and areas of concern. These reports also help leaders to make data-driven decisions about resource allocation based on the data. So we support districts in their varied attendance goals, whether that is to increase average daily attendance, which we know is tied to funding in several states, to reduce chronic absenteeism, and even to increase period level attendance for secondary students and to ensure that they're in class all day. As a result of this model, Kinvol's partner districts have experienced extremely positive results, including a 13 times improvement in daily attendance compared with their peers, a 10% overall reduction in chronic absenteeism, and a 22% reduction in chronic absenteeism for English language learners. One of the tier 2 interventions that Kinvo facilitates is a new program called Digital Attendance Postcards. It is our most popular program, and it's used in DC public schools, New York City public schools, Providence, Newark, and many other large urban districts. We have been engaged in an efficacy study in DC public schools this spring, run across about 20 different schools in the district, pre-K to 12. And within weeks of the implementation, all schools have experienced a decrease in absenteeism, averaging about 10% higher attendance in the students who are receiving the postcards compared with those who are not receiving them. And the fact that these postcards are sent via link in a text message rather than via mail ensures that there's immediate call to action, and enabling districts to immediately track open rates are all attributed at some of the factors that show the preliminary success of the program. I'll note that the research study have the complete results coming out probably over the summer, but we're really excited about the preliminary results that we're seeing. One of our longtime New York City partners, John Adams High School, which is overseen by one of our esteemed panelists, Karen Watts, who's also a Digital Promise member, explained that when his school started using the Kinvo software, they started to see a turnaround in not only attendance, but as we all know, family engagement is more than just about improving attendance. It's about improving students' academic outcomes and really building those two-way relationships. So the last note that I will leave you with before handing it over to our wonderful guest today is just a thought on what we've seen over working with districts for nearly a decade now on this particular issue of attendance and family engagement. Regardless of what tool, whether it's Kinvo or another tool, solution, program that a district implements, when you're looking at attendance and engagement, it is going to touch multiple district offices and many different workflows, which probably doesn't come as a major surprise. But it does also result, when you see success, it results in positive impacts across the district as well. Of course, when you're seeing lower rates of attendance or a drop in attendance, that's also going to have effects that kind of ripple throughout the district. So really the bottom line here is that high quality customer service for families, which part of that is two-way dialogue and really building relationships, results in better attendance, higher enrollment, more funding, and ultimately greater student success, which is, of course, what brings us all here, I'm sure, together today. So with that, I would love to introduce at this point our esteemed panelists. And as I say your name, you don't mind just bringing yourself off onto video, that'd be wonderful. I'm going to start from left to right. So welcome Dr. Ilia Molina, who's our Executive Director of Innovation and School Choice in Miami-Dade County Public Schools. Welcome, Dr. Molina. I'd also like to next invite and welcome Dr. Maria Ortiz, Assistant Superintendent from Newark Public Schools. Next, Sarah Walkup, Director of Family Engagement from Miami-Dade County Public Schools. And last but certainly not least, Karen Watts, Executive Superintendent from New York City Department of Education. So what I would love to do is to start by asking each of our panelists, and I'm going to start with you, Karen, if you don't mind, as our resident Digital Promise member here on the call today, to start by sharing a little bit about yourself and your district. And we will have a slide for each of you that outlines some of your district demographics so that our guests can follow along and kind of read that for themselves. But as you're kind of talking about your district, we would love to understand what attendance and engagement looked like pre-COVID, how it changed during COVID, and how your district is thinking about the opportunities for attendance and engagement and how important it might be as you're making recovery and reopening plans for the summer and into the fall. So with that, I will hand it over to you, Karen, to kick us off.
All right, good morning, good day. Thank you, Dwayne and Miriam, and Digital Promise and Kinvol's for this great opportunity to be with all of you today. I am excited to be on this panel discussing attendance improvement strategies and family empowerment. I'm Karen Watts, Executive Superintendent of Brooklyn North, New York City Department of Education, Borough Office, comprised of 7 community school districts in North Brooklyn and 1 high school district that covers the high schools in those 7 community districts. And Brooklyn North is home to the pedagogies of hope, love, and science, where we engender a sense of belonging and connectedness in our schools and offices, and hope for a more just future for all of us. So at Brooklyn North, there are 7 drivers of our work, and one of those drivers is the supportive environment framework. That includes everything from restorative practices and school safety to social emotional learning and relationship building, to yoga and mindfulness, where we have a teacher certification program for yoga teachers in our schools, to the elevation of parent and student voice, engagement and empowerment. It also includes our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, physical and mental health, and attendance practices in our 231 schools. As a former turnaround principal in 2 schools in New York City, I know that attendance is a leading indicator of students' academic success. And I have been an advocate of principals directly leading attendance work or attendance improvement work in each of their schools. So I was a high school superintendent in Brooklyn North before this current role. And it was during that time that I met Miriam from Kinninvolt. And I immediately saw the vision based on the work that I had personally done to improve attendance in 2 of the schools I ran previously. So I immediately introduced Miriam and Kinninvolt to some of my schools. And I believe that those were the first schools to use the program to much success. And then when the app came out, the schools in Brooklyn North continued to use them. And then when we had to pivot to remote learning, when the pandemic started, Kinninvolt quickly pivoted with us as well to help us take and record attendance in alignment with the New York City Department of Education attendance policies. Miriam has also attended the Brooklyn North leadership team meetings to support superintendents and attendance managers to better support our schools. So I'm happy to be here to learn more from our distinguished panelists and to share more of what we are doing in Brooklyn North. Thank you, Miriam. Back to you.
Thank you, Karen. Wonderful. So next, turn over to Ilya and Sarah to jointly present a little on what's been going on in Miami-Dade County.
Hello all, greetings from sunny Florida, Miami-Dade County Public Schools. We are the 4th largest school district, and as you can see there, we have approximately 334,000 students. That ranges, and this year it's a little lower. And I'm sure that's the same across districts, and that's a national trend. But, and we service approximately 19,000 teachers. So we're one of our largest districts. We think big, and I think for any of you who are also part of large districts, you know the challenge it is to move a large ship like this. And attendance happens to be one of those areas that we have a laser-like focus on because, like Miriam said, it is a cause and effect relationship with so many other areas in education. Previous to BC, like I like to call it, before COVID, my role was rolling out one of our superintendent's largest initiatives, which was middle school redesign. I was charged with trying to redesign soup to nuts our 49 traditional middle schools that service 40,000 students. And this included everything from more social emotional learning, mental health, more elective offerings, and a big part of it was more engagement, not just for the students, but engagement for the families. And I think that that's important because when we looked at the data across our district, the lowest attendance data was coming out of the grade bands that were 6th, 7th, and 8th for Miami-Dade County Public Schools. And we'll be getting and unpacking what we think were some of those issues, I'm sure, in a bit. But post our pandemic, my role has been on 2 major things. One is our distance learning option, which we call My School Online, MSO. I'm the director over that. And I'm also the director over services in response to that. So our distance learning helpline, we have a helpline that services any of our teachers, students, and their families when they are experiencing issues logging in or anything that has to do with instructional technology or ITS. And I'm also have been charged now coming for the 21-22 school year with being the curriculum lead and designer of instructional technology resources for our bureau. And so the reason why that's important is because I think, as you'll see when we keep talking, that the variables, even though have been, some of them are common denominators from BC before COVID and after COVID, there are new barriers that we've dealt with as far as attendance and engagement that required a unique twist on looking at how we support our students and their families. I am going to now turn it over to one of my partners in crime, Sarah Walkup, to talk about her area. We work very closely together, but in different bureaus, and she has a unique perspective on engagement.
Thank you, Ilya. And thank you for inviting us to participate on this panel today. I, as Ilya mentioned, work in a different bureau. My role is pretty laser focused on family engagement. So I'll steal Ilya's terminology, and BC before COVID, we were really targeting particular schools. So I got to work closely with Ilya on this middle school redesign process and targeting middle schools with family engagement practices. And when COVID hit last year, we recognized that while our office is small, we really needed to figure out a way to support all of our schools. And so Ilya kind of touched on the number of students and teachers that we serve every day. And so those families all have unique opportunities. They bring unique challenges to the table as well. And so we've really been working hard this year in aligning the various bureaus and departments that oversee some aspect of family engagement to make sure that we are preparing our schools as best as we can to really build these authentic partnerships. And we'll talk a little bit more later in the session on how important we've realized that families are this year. Obviously, you know, this is my laser focus. So I, over the last few years, have really kind of dug into family engagement, particularly in supporting academic learning. But with COVID and post, I guess, PC, post-COVID, you know, we're really acknowledging that one, parents have been brought in to the classroom, so to speak, when we were all doing online learning. So we have to acknowledge that parents are now accustomed and used to being part of that academic discussion in a way that they never were before. And then the other piece of it, those students that have not been, you know, we haven't had a chance or been able to really reach them in an ongoing and regular way this year, thinking about how do we engage with those families, how do we engage with those populations, and really build strong relationships so that families feel like the school is a safe place for them and a safe place to send their children. So I'm excited to dive into the conversation with the rest of the panelists and look forward to the questions from the audience.
And I think for our viewing audience, it's probably important for you all to know that we started going back physically to school in person in October. We approximately have 50% of our student population choosing a physical environment and approximately 50% still choosing to do a distance learning, our MSO, My School Online option. And that ranges from school building to school building, but that's our district average.
Thank you, Ilya. That's a really good point. And Dr. Ortiz, I'll turn it over to you to share a little bit about your district and your work.
Wonderful. So can everybody hear me? Yes, okay, great.
Loud
So
and clear.
good afternoon, everyone. I am so elated that we're here and that we're having this conversation. I believe it is very, very important just to pause for a second and just to, you know, take the pulse on how we're doing and what things can we do together collaboratively across the nation just to move this incredible, very important topic of attendance, which is already a challenge anyway. But again, thank you to Kinvolved for putting this together and Digital Promise for just really taking the time to just collaborate on this effort. So I am the assistant superintendent of the high schools in Newark, New Jersey. Newark is the largest school district in the state of New Jersey. We serve 36,000 students and 20,000 charter students. So overall, we're a little bit over 55,000 students that we serve in this community in the city. We have 81 schools. It is an urban district. We have about 77% of our students are rated free or reduced lunch. And we have about 17% that are English language learners. So it is a very concentrated and diverse community that we serve. And again, we are just, as challenged as larger districts as well in dealing with attendance and how to get our students and the families more engaged. I think it is critical to understand the role of families during this time and the diversities, right? Because we have some students who are able to, gain the resources and have tutors and, have that online learning at home take place. But the majority of our population really struggles with, with just being online and adjusting to all of the newness of, having a digital district, right? So one of the things that, I said, the Newark Public Schools, it took 167 years, right, to make it a live district this far along, right? Within 1 year, from 167 to make it live to 1 year, we had to make it digital. So we were having to operate two districts, a live district where we were still supporting families, whether it was, providing meals for them that we never stopped, whether it was providing, resources for the families, with equipment for dealing with COVID or technical equipment. So our schools continue to operate. And simultaneously, we also had to do a digital district where we had to have all of our teachers go online. We had to have all of our programming go online. We have, our programs with after schools go online, so we continue that. And that was sort of like a hurry up, we got to make this happen to all of our families. So we had to, again, pause and say, and give everybody across the nation, a hand of applause for taking that charge and just keep it going to make sure that we were supporting our students more than ever during this very difficult time. Heads off to Kinvolved for really having this initiative and this program that is really focused on increasing family engagement. When we initially started with Kinvolved, it wasn't so much to raise the attendance because we knew that that was a challenge and we knew that we needed support. But one of the things that we are really, really eager to do is to increase engagement with our families and our communities. Because if the families and the communities are engaged and we have that communication, then I can say that the ripple effect of that will be higher attendance. So again, thank you to Kinvolved and thank you for having Newark Public Schools with us today.
Thank you, everyone. It's more than our pleasure to have you all. So thank you so much for making the time and for your great insights so far. Before we jump into the additional questions that we're really excited to have you talk through, Dr. Ortiz and Karen, would you like to just give an update on, like Ilya did? Thank you, Ilya, for that great idea. Just where your districts are in the reopening process now, what percentage approximately of kids are in person and virtual and so on. That would be, I think, probably helpful for our guests.
Yeah, so we are, we reopen our district April the 12th. And so we have about 35% capacity filled. And we are slowly increasing in time, but we have about 35% of the students are going in and the rest are continuing. We will have a summer enrichment program just so that we can support all of our students. And that is scheduled to start July 1st. And that will also be live. It will not be remote. So we are expecting to go full throttle in September. We're reopening schools, at 100%.
Wonderful.
Same here in New York City. We are at about 35% or so on site. We have opened our schools since October and at various times had students on site in the buildings. But since March 22nd, we've had all of our buildings open and students have returned on site. As we think of the summer, our chancellor has a vision of opening up every one of our school buildings, as many as can be opened this summer, to have our students come back, reconnect in person with their peers, in person with teachers, and with their school buildings. Some of our students who are remote and have been remote since the pandemic started have not been into new school buildings that they have transitioned to. And so it will be an exciting time this summer to have students back into the buildings and so that we can have a smooth start to the 21-22 school year with students acclimating back to physical buildings during the summer.
Wonderful, thank you. And I just want to say that, for you all, we've been, working alongside you, New York, certainly the entire time, as well as alongside Sarah and Ilya. Excited to have the opportunity to start working in Newark this spring as well. But just, as an observer and a partner, it's been incredible to see the, challenges that you've all gone through and the closing, reopening, trying to navigate the many complex, factors that go into these decisions and weighing different stakeholders' inputs. And I just want to really commend you all for the incredibly challenging work you've done. And it's really been an honor to work alongside you and support in, this particular way and among the many different things that you're trying to manage as well during this difficult time. But I'm very excited and optimistic, as I know that you all are, and I'm sure many in the audience are as well, about the opportunities that come ahead in the summer and into the fall. So with that, would love to just ask a couple of questions, and I see a couple of audience questions coming in the Q&A, and I just want to assure our audience as well that we will have time for a question and answer session that Dwayne, my colleague from Digital Promise, will be leading. So feel free to keep asking those questions and we will get to them as much as we're able as time permits. But before we go there, let's start kind of from the beginning, from the basics, and anyone feel free to jump in here. What do you think are the most common underlying causes that you're seeing leading to absenteeism in any learning scenario of the many that we've talked about and experienced this year? Ilya, I think I saw you come off mute, so go ahead.
So I think the main variable is student engagement, and I'll put it in through both lenses of when you're in person prior to COVID and how it transformed during this distance learning environment. So we had the pleasure and we felt very strongly about paneling students and teachers around what were some of the reasons why students weren't attending school or opting into one school or another, or really what their experience was in traditional middle school, specifically when we were doing middle school redesign. And we got a wealth of information. Middle school students, if you've not taught middle school, they're very candid. They are not going to mince words with you, right? And so when the students were paneled and we also had them surveyed, and we did a lot of things around truly getting the student perspective, they told us that one of the main reasons why they didn't want to come to school is they were bored. And they were bored for a multitude of reasons, right? One, they told us that the transition from elementary to middle school, their elementary school teachers were doing some pretty cool stuff like hands-on projects, bringing out manipulatives, including music, all of those different strategies that we know truly hook the student into the lesson. And they're like, and then I get into middle school and then I have this like, I'm the math expert sage on the stage doing, a math lesson. They're like, oh, I learned so much better the other way, right? So they weren't engaged in their core classes. The other thing we noticed was that in this super hyper focused around academic achievement, little by little over the course of probably 12 to 18 years, we had started removing some of the things that really students were excited about middle school, right? And that meant everything from elective offerings to sports to clubs. And the students said, those are the things that get me excited about coming to school. And if I don't have an art elective, or I don't have a coding elective, or if I can't do culinary, well, I don't want to have 2 math classes. There's nothing exciting about going to school if I have to take 2 math classes, 2 language arts classes, 2 science classes, and then all I have is a test prep class, right? Like, it's torture. So we started really trying to make school fun again, right? And in that, we found that attendance went up. And not just attendance went up, but behavior problems went down, staff satisfactory at school went up. And so really trying to come up with a fun school based on student choice and voice, right? Not just we're going to throw things at the wall, asking students what they want, increased attendance in person. So now let's fast forward to a pandemic environment, right? And like Dr. Ortiz was mentioning, at a flip of a script, we had to go from teachers not really sure about blended learning, I don't know about using this instructional technology, to this is your new way of life for us to survive, right? And so kudos to our teachers. I find that nationwide, our teachers truly stepped it up. They asked questions and they tried everything out to reach our students. But some of the major strategies that we were seeing teachers use were also some of the least engaging one. And what I like to call the most common one is being zoomed to death, right? In a normal environment, we would never think that good teaching is really a teacher just speaking to kids for the entire block of instruction, right? And so when we move to this virtual instructional environment or distance learning environment, that was the easiest strategy to do. So teachers would get on to Zoom or Microsoft Teams Live or what Google Classroom, whatever it is that your district is using, and they talk to kids the whole time, right? And for like 2 seconds, the kids were engaged. And then after that, the kids were like, I'm not even gonna log in because I want to poke myself in the eye for listening to my teacher for the entire block, right? So in that lens of student engagement, I think we really need to focus on the end user here through the lens of empathy. How do we get kids to attend school? And I think that that's step one. And I'm sure Sarah and some of the other folks on this can talk about, not once you've addressed that one layer of student engagement, how do you address the other layers of being accountable and family engagement and really reaching out to the other stakeholders to make sure that it's a full circle, holistic approach?
I would add to, and agree with you, Dr. Molina, that student engagement is the foundation. So and particularly around the instructional program. So if the program is not engaging, we saw that a lot during remote learning, with students not wanting to turn on their cameras and to engage in the online lessons, etc. And so something that we have been doing and will be continuing in the new school year is to really look at the instructional program and to integrate social emotional learning and academic learning along with various electives and experiences for students. Because we see that as a way of engaging students and hopefully we'll have more of them coming into the building next school year. So we are planning to have exciting electives for them and so on, especially in the areas of STEM. We have great civics programs here in New York City and so on. But some other items that contribute to absenteeism include health of students, family dynamics, and schools maybe not reaching out just to every student who is absent in a given day. And so what we have put in place here in Brooklyn North is an attendance management structure that has the oversight of the borough office and then at the superintendent's level, and ensuring that every school has an attendance meeting led by the principal every week. So there's an attendance team at the school with an attendance coordinator, but we have elevated attendance management at the school level as something that the principal has to directly lead. So that has led to improvements in communication between schools and families, and ensuring that more students are connecting. And then when they do, then we have exciting programs to keep them interested and engaged.
I can also say, and I echoed, Dr. Watts and Dr. Molina here. One of the things that we have done here in Newark, in aside from all of the, the programs that we have put together, we have also extensively looked at our curriculum and students' interest, particularly with CTE courses and what CTE programs are most needed, and most required and most interesting to our students by surveying them. We actually just opened up 2 new schools, one school of fashion and design, and we just registered about 84% of that population, and we have a partnership that we did at the collegiate level with a high school that is focused on fashion and design in Parsons School of Design in New York City, and that has really pumped it up the energy again to, hey, yeah, we're going back to school. This is happening. The other school that we did open is the new school of information technology and data science. So specializing the programs, particularly with the CTEs, are really engaging students back and saying, you know what, now I can see the purpose of taking 2 math classes as opposed to in the past, now I'm required to take these classes to catch up. But I definitely highly recommend, us, the whole nation looking at the importance of developing CTE courses and specialized interest courses for our students, who they are the futures, the ones that are going to be skilled and licensed in these specific areas. So we are definitely looking at, very comprehensive understanding of their interest, the parents' interest, the community's interest, and the trajectory of where are we going to be as a nation and 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now.
I think that's such a great point. And Sarah, I'm going to throw this question over to you, actually, my next question, but I just really appreciate you all kind of talking a little bit about the challenges that you've seen that are underlying causes, but also starting to talk about some of the solutions. I think student engagement is such a huge component. And Sarah, I know that my next question is going to be something you're really passionate about. The other piece, that I think is really critical, and I know Sarah will agree, is that family engagement, family communication, those 2-way dialogues. So Sarah, if you don't mind kind of starting the conversation, how can effective communication with families, do we think, improve attendance and ultimately student outcomes? And what are some of the solutions that you're implementing in Miami-Dade to that end?
So I think I 100% agree. Obviously, students are our main kind of customer in terms of everything that we do. And I would say that parents are a very close second. So in terms of attendance, how do you get kids to school? Kids, generally speaking, are not getting up on their own accord, walking themselves to school. Parents play a huge role in this. And I think traditionally in education, not that we've forgotten parents, but there's such an emphasis, as there should be, on students and student voice, which is very important. I think sometimes we forget that parent voice needs to be included in our discussions and our planning, all of that sort of thing. So a few things. I mean, the first thing is very easy. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say it's easy, but in terms of the idea is having the right contact information for our parents. I think Ilya can attest to this. When we had to reach over 10,000 disengaged students, that's a huge issue in most schools and most districts, and ensuring that we have the correct contact information. And so going back to, parents are going to make sure that the school has their contact information if they want to hear from the school. So I think we've really tried to emphasize from the start of the school year, teachers and administrators really putting, an emphasis on building positive relationships. And what do those positive relationships look like? It means bringing parents in, and it doesn't necessarily even have to be physically, but bringing parents into the physical or virtual learning space and talking with them about what is their child going to be learning this year? What are, things that the parents can do at home to support learning? I saw in the Q&A, somebody asked, how do you engage families that don't want their students to engage in education? My answer is, I don't know that I've ever met a parent who doesn't want their child to engage, but a question that I would have is, are you meeting the parent where they are? So your idea of education might look very different to the parent's idea of education or their experience with education. And so, you know, sometimes we have to, just like we often know that we have to put ourselves in our students' shoes and to understand what they're doing, what they're going through at home. Same thing with parents. You know, Miriam, we were talking the other day about customer service in terms of, you know, think about a time when you had a really bad or good customer service experience. And it's the same thing with parents. If the first contact that you're making with your parent is to tell them that their child is not doing well in school, that they have behavioral problems or attendance is an issue, a parent most likely is already going to know some of those things. And so it's this negative, you know, connotation that they're making with school. And so I would say the first thing, obviously, really putting an emphasis on getting contact information. So we don't have, you know, there's tools, and I know Miriam will hopefully talk a little bit about it, but there's tools like Kinvo that are great ways for you to kind of manage that contact information. But if you don't have it, you know, we don't necessarily have the best way of managing contact information. So an administrator and their leadership team, you know, thinking about how are we going to throughout the school year. It's not enough just to send out, you know, at the beginning, make sure that we have your contact information. You have to do that regularly. And you have to put an emphasis on teachers when they get new phone numbers or emails to share that with the front office. And then again, you know, working with staff on how do you build those positive relationships from the very beginning of the school year, and really emphasizing your first call should not be a negative call. And if it is a negative call, then you're not doing it right. So I would say those two things to really focus on. And then again, just we need to meet parents where they are. This pandemic has really shed light on the fact that it is so important to, you know, connect with our families in our community and make sure that they're okay, because a lot of families are not. And those children, we see it in the classroom, but there's questions I think that we need to be asking our families. How can we support, you know, as a larger school community, not necessarily maybe the teacher, you know, but our school district and that school community.
Yes, I agree with that, Sarah, especially the whole community coming together to support the parents and families. We have done, and you know, that was one of the silver linings of the pandemic. We're now able to bring our parents on to Zoom meetings and team meetings and interact with them in ways we had not done before. And we've held wellness forums for families. We have held food drives to address food insecurity in our communities and so on. So there are many ways to engage and connect with families. But what I am most proud of, what we're doing here in New York City, is around parent empowerment. And that includes educating parents, providing parents with resources that they can be informed and continue to support their children's education. So to that end, we now have every parent and student has a New York City school account that we can communicate to parents through. We have launched Parent University with many courses on assisting parents in helping their children. You know, courses for the parents of students with IEPs or students with disabilities, courses for parents of multilingual learners, etc. So we have done a lot to share information during this pandemic as we had never shared with parents pre-COVID. So, you know, it's terrible that it had to come to a pandemic for us to do this, but these are the silver linings that we're seeing, and we want to ensure we continue with those into the new school year.
That's awesome. I think just to add to the Parent University, we have Parent Academy, which I'm guessing is pretty similar. And I think along the same lines as, you know, Ilya and I think both Karen and Dr. Ortiz were saying, you know, reaching out to students and what they want or what they need in their education. I think similarly, really making sure that when you, whether it's a, you know, course for parents or resources, really bringing in parents to the discussion to hear from them in terms of what do you need, what would be beneficial, you know, for you as a parent.
But I think that that question is very telling, right? About how do you engage families who do not want their students to engage in education? And I can tell you that that is a very common question coming from a former school site administrator and going through educational leadership courses. There is no such thing as a peer course on how do we engage families, right? And I think that that's important because when we speak to administrators, they're telling us that they too see that there's a gap in their expertise in that area, and they're asking for support. So I'm hoping Miriam gets to that portion because I think it's super valuable about the professional development aspect of how do you engage families and why it's not family involvement, right? It's engagement. And I think flipping that script for schools and giving them that information has been really eye-opening for them. And I think also you need to ask your end user, your stakeholders, how it is that they want to be engaged, right? And not everybody wants to be engaged the same way. And you need to make decisions as a school site in a district based on that data that you're getting. And I'll give you an example. At our district, we made a blanket statement. This was before shutting down for the pandemic, that schools could not use, and we only have a one-way messaging application, couldn't send text messages to families, right? We were going to reserve that for just emergency purposes from the Office of Communications. And so, but when we asked parents and we asked students, what's the preferred means that you'd like to be communicated with? They all said text messages, right? So there's a disconnect there, right? You need to listen through the lens of empathy from your end user on how they want to be communicated with, right? And so I really try to always infuse the design thinking concept, which is before you start problem solving, look at your specific end user, your student, your teacher, the families of the students, and find out what they want, because it may not be text messaging. At one of our middle schools, 97% free and reduced lunch, about 98% ESOL students, they wanted to use Instagram, right? That may not work at every school, but they did some in-house data collection tools to be able to talk to students about what's the best way to contact you and how can we reach you in a time where we can't see you physically every single day. And these are when we ask the school, and they have phenomenal attendance this school year, if they're going to continue doing that when we have full reopening in the fall, they said, absolutely, it's been working. Why change that? So those are the types of things that you need to do. And I'll pop in a link around design thinking for those of you who are not familiar, because it really can be game changing for your school or district.
I completely agree with Dr. Molina. And one thing that I just want to encourage everyone to do is to tap into other resources in the community. So for example, the police department, the firemen, the department, the community social service agencies, the hospitals, they also are asking, hey, how can we get more of the families involved? How can we get more community engagement involved? So having them do events so that we can work together to collaborate on certain events, whether it's, knowledge events for COVID information or resources events, or hey, this is available. There are so many different topics to engage the families that, in one of our high schools, and as a matter of fact, the high school that Kinvolve is using here in Westside High School, we provide dinners to families, throughout the week. And we have, during that time, we attempt to engage them and to let them know, hey, if you have a change of information, with your phone number, with no addresses, because for, one study that we definitely want to continue to do is just how much mobility is happening across the nation. Students' mobility rates are increasingly at a high, where they're going from one community to the next, they're moving with families, they are, losing jobs and changing jobs. And there's just so much mobility that it does have an impact on the consistency and the sustainability in urban public school systems, where it's just really difficult, I have to say, from our perspective. So in terms of the engagement, ensuring that we have that communal collaboration, it's really, really critical.
I want to just thank you all for your incredible passion about these topics. These are just such important discussion pieces, and ultimately it's about action, right? And so I know I shared a little bit about Kinvolved at the beginning, but since I think Ilya and Sarah and a couple of our panelists have, suggested just share, recap a little bit. Kinvolved provides support around a lot of the areas that we've been talking about here. So again, we have a software Kinvo that's used in some capacity in each of the districts that are presenting here today. And we facilitate that two-way dialogue, that positive communication, texting based, but also email and phone calls, sending attachments with visuals for families who might, prefer to receive information in that way, or may have low literacy rates, but really breaking down those barriers that might exist regardless of, language, access to device, internet, through our software, and then rolling that up into data that's really informative for both school leaders as well as district leaders. But a system that's one system where teachers, guidance, social workers, after school program leaders, administrators, district leaders, everyone can use one tool together and have, as Ilya mentioned, professional learning behind that our team provides, that's really rooted in research, but translates into actual practice. So I'll share our link to our website in case you're interested in learning more, but just wanted to kind of circle back and reinforce a little bit about the work that we do as an option or an optional solution to some of these discussion points brought up today. So with that, thank you so much to our panelists. I'm going to hand it over to Dwayne from Digital Promise to lead us through, I think, a pretty quick Q&A. I know we answered some of the questions already that came through, because we have a super on top of it panel here is watching the Q&A, and then to close us out with a couple of final remarks. So thank you.
All right, great conversation. There are a few, you've pretty much answered all the questions in the Q&A. You've done my job, but I do have a few questions. One is, how do you get in contact with the most marginalized families in your districts? How do you do that? Because a lot of them, may not have access, to internet or, cell phones. How do you maintain that? And where do you go to do that? And I'll start with you, Dr. Ortiz. You're muted.
Dwayne, can you repeat that question one more time? It was in and out.
Yeah, how do you reach out to marginalized families, the most marginalized families who may not have access to internet or phones, and where do you go to get that connection?
Well, I think that it was Ms. Watts who said, meeting the families where they are. I think that's really critical. And I know Sarah also mentioned that, just really being present to their needs and how to assist and support them. When the families come in and they're burdened and they're marginalized, they already have a heaviness that comes with them, that what we don't need is to fault them or make them wrong because of what they're not doing. So let's talk and start with what they are doing. And at least you have that kind of connection with them, and you can start from an asset mindset and not a deficit mindset. So I think it's really, really critical that we first say, the first thing you ask is, have you eaten?
Yeah.
Would you like a glass of water? We don't know, what their situation is. And first, once they start opening up and they really believe and that you are authentic about their support, I think that is not just a matter of marginalized families. That's anybody, any human being. Once you feel that kind of authenticity and connection with someone, you let your guard down and you say, you know what, let me confess to you that my lights were cut off. So we don't have, we don't have electricity. Let me confess to you that I don't have any cable right now, which means that I don't have any Wi-Fi. Is there any way that you can help me with a hotspot or something? So once they start releasing some of those anxieties and those pressures, I think it's really important that we, make a way. I believe one of my models in life is also, there's always a way. There's a way, right? So it's important and very critical that we find a way for these parents that, because of their lack of resources or because of their lack of exposure, they may not have privy to have all of these resources and all these opportunities in mind. So I definitely think that the way that we connect to marginalized families is just, again, meeting from an asset mindset, making a way for them, opening it up and really meeting them where they are.
Wow. Anyone else like to share with that?
Yes, I would like to. Go ahead, Sarah.
I was just going to say, we cannot do this work alone. And so we really, I mean, we often reach out to, whether it's the faith-based community, you know, we have a lot of community-based organizations that are serving particular, you know, pieces or parts of our community that we lean on, because oftentimes parents, for whatever reason, may have a distrust in the school setting, in government in general. And so you have to go where they're trusting, you know, and that might be, like I said, the faith-based community. There's some local community centers that families go to. We've got some, you know, housing communities that have a, you know, center in the housing community that, again, we cannot do this alone. And if we think we can, then we're kidding ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I agree. Here in New York City, especially in Brooklyn North, we ensured that we went out to the NYCHA houses. We went out to, you know, the centers for students and temporary housing. And we brought devices there. We supported them on site. And of course, we provided food for anyone in the community. Not only students and their parents, but anyone who lived in the community come to one of the locations and get food during the pandemic. Yes.
Wow. That was a great discussion. Thank you, guys. I think we're going to wrap up. I will end with one more question. What's one thing that you wish will remain that you've learned throughout this pandemic that you want to remain after this pandemic is over? And we'll start with you, Mrs. Watts.
Thank you, Dwayne. For me, it's the sense of community that has been built during the pandemic, how everyone has come together to support each other, and the way school staff work closely with district staff, with borough staff and central staff. A lot of the silos that existed before seem to have evaporated. So I'm looking forward to, you know, all of us working together in service of our students and their success. And yeah, definitely would like to see that continue.
Wow. Ms. Walkup.
I would just, I guess, add to that. I think we're actually in, not only, you know, we're in this pandemic, we're in the process of a new 5-year strategic plan for our district. And, you know, we just finished, we did like I think we met with over 1,000 stakeholders in small focus groups where, you know, we listened. We asked like 5 questions and it was their time to talk to us. And every single focus group, somebody said, thank you for listening. And so I think just continuing to break down barriers internally in our school district. So like Ms. Watts said, with silos, you know, break down barriers there, and then also break down barriers outside of, you know, the district as well, and really come together as a community to serve our students.
Dr. Ortiz.
I have to say that kindness. There has been like a really outpouring of kindness, you know, from the children all the way to the elders. And, you know, and I want to say from the East Coast to the West Coast, from the North to the South, I just believe that there has been a shift. And now that, you know, there is some sense of return to something. We don't want to say normancy because there was nothing normal, but we want to say there was a shift, right? And from it, what was extrapolated from the experience was just a wave and an outpouring of kindness. And because of that, folks are more resilient, more patient, more kind, which I think we also needed to just pause and recognize. So I think kindness is definitely one of the wish that I had that will continue.
Yeah, Dr. Molina.
So ditto to everything that's been said, right? Like, and that's through the lens of social emotional learning and connection and community. Agreed with all that. I'm gonna add one more, and it's toward the area of which I'm hyper focused on and right now, which is instructional technology. I'm from the Office of Innovation and School Choice, the area of instructional technology. And what I hope doesn't change is I hope that all of these new ways and strategies and applications that we've added to our toolbox of how to engage students and their families, that we continue to move the needle in that direction, right? That we don't forget all these things that we just learned out of necessity, but how they've been really transformative and pushed us forward. So I hope that we continue to move the needle in that way, to have because I believe that even though I think most people will say that distance learning is definitely not the best instructional method for students. However, blended learning is the future, right? We want to prepare our students to be the best that they can be. What's come out is that they need to be able to use technology fluently and without hesitation. And so I really hope that we don't move the needle back in the wrong direction. But I don't want to be remiss without saying that our teachers have done a great job, and happy Teacher Appreciation Week. And thank you for all the work you guys have done. There is no way this nation could have survived without the efforts. And we know that you guys have been working yourself to the bone for over a year now. So thank you all the teachers that are here.
Oh, yes, I agree with you 100%. My mother, who was a teacher, and my wife, who's currently upstairs teaching now to some sixth grade ELA students. Happy Teacher Appreciation Week. I now want to close out with my co-host, Miriam. You did an awesome job. So what do you think should remain?
Wonderful, thank you. Those are hard responses to follow. I echo. I think the two biggest things is that parents have really gotten more involved and have really seen what education's like by being the teachers at home, right? And have seen what's working and what needs to be improved. And it's been a real opportunity, I think, to incorporate their voice much more. I think also, the tools that didn't work that we thought were working for parent communication, that worked maybe well enough, sort of, or were masked by the fact that we could see kids in person, those no longer work. And so now we know that, and we know what, kind of is left that does work, that can take us forward. And I think, from the school system side as well, there's just been such an increased focus on bringing parents in and making them part of the conversation in a way that we certainly didn't see before. So there's been a lot of difficult challenges during the pandemic, but there certainly are some silver linings, and completely agree that there's lots of opportunity for lasting change. So just echo everything everyone else has said as well.
Awesome. I would like to thank our panelists for an awesome opportunity for sharing this information. I think you shared a wealth of knowledge with our audience. I would like to thank you for joining us, audience. Please see the links on the screen on the slide, as well as the contact information to learn more about either Kinvolve or Digital Promise, or both. You will also receive a follow-up email from Digital Promise with a recap from today's presentation. Now, I would like to shift briefly to some upcoming opportunities, and like to invite my colleague, Ms. Megan Pattenhouse, to come on and tell us about some opportunities that Digital Promise have to offer. Megan?
Great, thanks so much, Dwayne. I'm Megan Pattenhouse. I'm a learning designer for Project Topeka. I wanted to hop on because we are hoping to connect with districts who are looking for resources to improve their students' argumentative writing skills. We're currently recruiting school districts to pilot a new writing feedback tool. That's Project Topeka. To help you visualize that, I'm going to give you like a 30-second tour. So on Topeka, we have a variety of engaging prompts. Teachers can create an assignment that has a set of readings and multimedia sources that can help students take a position and form their argument. Once students have drafted their essays, and Dwayne, if you just hop to the next slide, they'll be able to see those prompts. Awesome. And then after the students draft those essays, they'll be able to receive instant and rubric aligned feedback. 89% of our teachers from the spring pilot reported that Topeka saved them time, and 90% of them said it allowed them that precious time to conference and give students even more feedback. Once students have drafted their essays, teachers will receive a score report that helps them to understand how students are currently writing, and then they can use that to drive both whole and small group instruction. And finally, once they have that information, we have lessons that are aligned to that rubric, as well as interventions that help teachers to meet students where they are. So I know that was a really quick overview. In case you're interested or want to learn more about this opportunity, me is going to put our short form in the chat. It's bit.ly/DP Topeka. We're hoping specifically to partner with districts and ELA teachers in 7th, 8th, and 9th grades over this coming school year, and are looking for districts that support Black, Latina, and students who are experiencing poverty as part of our inclusive innovation process. Again, if your interest is piqued, you can let us know at bit.ly/DP Topeka, and I hope to see some of you on one of those interest calls soon.
Thank you so much, Megan. And ladies and gentlemen, this is a great opportunity to sign up to get a flavor of what Digital Promise is about. So please, please sign up for Project Topeka. All right, our next opportunity. So a lot of you have heard about Digital Promise in the League of Innovative Schools. Well, guess what? For our league, we actually have a league recruitment going on. Applications are due on May 21st. So if you are interested in joining a network of the most forward-thinking and supportive network of educational leaders, please, please invite your district superintendent to sign up to be a member of the League of Innovative Schools. Once again, please sign up. We're looking for a new class of innovative-minded individuals to join the league. For our next upcoming webinar, which will be held on May 19th, where we'll be talking about building connections with asynchronous and synchronous learning. So if you would like to sign up for that to learn more about that process and learn from our league, a few league districts and teachers, please feel free to sign up. Until next time, remember, happy Teacher Appreciation Week and continue to do right by students. Thank you for coming, and we look forward to seeing you soon.